Professor Joseph, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's start with the statement from the State Department. It recently released an official statement, as reported by the Voice of America, stating that the Democratic Front is an unacceptable partner of the U.S. in Montenegro. As you are surely aware, the negotiations about the formation of the new government are underway in Montenegro, and it seems that the participation of the Democratic Front is actually being considered. Now, what is your take on this, and how will the U.S. react if actually the Democratic Front participates in the new government?
Well, I think it's very good that the U.S. voiced, without any reservation, without any ambiguity, voiced its disapproval of Democratic Front entering into the Montenegrin government. And it's appropriate, it's sound. Look, Montenegro is a member of NATO, and that was a hard-won achievement for Montenegro. It took a lot of work, and it's been enormously positive and only positive for Montenegro. Absolutely no negatives from Montenegro's NATO membership, and particularly so in situations like this. And it's the same is true for neighbors, including North Macedonia, where NATO is a very important stabilizing factor in Montenegro and in its neighbors that are also members, Croatia, North Macedonia as well. So, and Albania. So this was a appropriate and sound message that bringing in an anti-NATO and pro-Russian, pro-Serbian political party thought to be, and quite plausibly thought to be, heavily influenced, if not controlled from Belgrade, is unacceptable. And that should be doubly so, given Belgrade's own position on Russia and the continuing refusal of Serbian President Alexander Vučić to put sanctions on Russia, to host Sputnik Serbia, to transmit Russia Today propaganda, to amplify pro-Russian narratives, to allow the Interior Minister Alexander Vulin to visit Moscow, and most recently, we have the announcement that Milorad Dodik will be meeting Putin in Moscow. These are all completely unacceptable developments, and so it's completely appropriate that a political party, DF, that Democratic Front, that advocates all of these policies and positions would enter the Montenegrin government, again, which is a loyal NATO ally. It's absolutely correct that it's unacceptable.
Well, how would the U.S. actually react if this were to happen?
Well, the U.S. is going to be very concerned. If this were to actually come to fruition, and I hope it won't, if the other parties in the government were to make the mistake of forming a new government with Democratic Front in the government, a political party controlled, if not heavily influenced, if not controlled from Belgrade, pro-Russian, anti-NATO in its perspective. If Montenegro were to make that mistake, it would be a problem. Now, let's remember, the United States recognizes Montenegro and understands that Montenegro is a sovereign state. So that's part of being a sovereign state, and that's part of having respectful relations with a country, that you respect that. But the United States and U.S. allies and partners in Europe, in the European Union, will all be very concerned. And let's remember, Montenegro and its neighbors need good relations with the United States and the European Union. And bringing into government actors who are unacceptable is not a way to have good relations. And let's remember, even in European Union states, when they form governments, they also are held to this standard. There was a government in Austria some years back that brought into power a political party that was completely unacceptable to the rest of the European Union as well as the United States. And Austria suffered for that. So it would be a mistake for Montenegro to have to suffer for that, for making that type of a move. And I certainly hope that the political leadership in the country is wise enough to protect the interests of Montenegro and not make such a mistake and take such a provocative measure. Please.
Well, the government of Prime Minister Dritan Abazovic, which is in its technical mandate, has brought a lot of, let's say, political and all kinds of other instabilities to Montenegro. Now, how do you explain the fact that the Open Balkans project, which is supported by Abazovic, how do you explain the fact that the US representatives and ambassadors in the region have supported this project, despite the fact that that same project is supported by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban? How do you explain this, let's say, paradox?
It is, of course, that anytime you have Russian support for Western initiatives, that's a very good sign that these initiatives may not have the objectives or the impact that the Western backers think they do. But that's not really the main point, is that Putin backs it, and Lavrov has backed it. Lavrov gave positive statements about Open Balkans. And yes, those are signs that you need to take a closer look. And that's the problem. I think the intentions of the American backers and proponents of Open Balkans are, I think that they have positive intentions toward the Balkans. They don't have negative intentions. I think the original idea was to get something going, try to get something positive, but it's really a mistaken approach for several reasons. And I've written about this, and I've actually spoken to U.S. officials about this. It's short-sighted, unfortunately. The Open Balkans, in essence, is a pathway to increased Serbian political power. I repeat that. It's an economic initiative that leads to greater Serbian political power. And I believe the skeptics in the region that are not just in Montenegro, but in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in Kosovo, I think their skepticism is warranted. This venture, it's very simple. The idea that trade equals trust is simply a very naive example and a naive theory. And we have the example of Russia and Ukraine. We have the example of China and Taiwan. In both cases, high trade, there was very high trade between Russia and Ukraine up to February 24th, and continuing extremely high trade between Taiwan and China, and yet look at the relations between both. So the real lesson here is about the character of the regime that you are trading with. If you're trading with fellow democracies, then trade is good. And it does improve and build relations. If you're trading with a larger, more powerful country that is autocratic in nature, as Serbia is, then it's a problem. It's a problem for Ukraine, it's a problem for Taiwan, and it is a problem for Montenegro and Kosovo in particular, which run high trade deficits with Serbia. And, of course, we have to bear in mind, Serbia is a much larger economy. So you bring down all these trade barriers, and it's the Serbian economy that will benefit the most, that will attract the most foreign investment. It will always get more benefits from Open Balkans, and those economic benefits will translate into political power. And the solution here is very simple. It's not to stop the efforts to build a common regional market. That's not what we need to do. We need to have these efforts and energy, including the American energy, within the Berlin process, which exists already, which you have the strongest economy in Europe, Germany, also enormously influential politically, leading this, and which has had actually demonstrable achievements, including the roaming. issue, and which works closely with the RCC to the Regional Cooperation Council to have all 6 countries in an equal level and under the auspices and the ambit of the entire European Union aspirations. That's the way to advance economic cooperation, not in this somewhat contradictory and competitive alternative that is designed to build Serbian political power, which is why Russia backs it. It's really one of the most perplexing questions in recent years in the Balkans about what former Prime Minister, now the leader of the technical government, Abazovic, what was he thinking? What were his motives? It's one of the most baffling and perplexing political performances in the Balkans in recent years. He came into power in this most recent government in April. He stated, as he took over as a prime minister, in a way, a historic step in some respects as prime minister. He stated that his priorities were the political stability in the country and the European Union perspective. And he went in the completely opposite direction from that. He took this highly provocative, highly divisive step of this basic agreement with the Serbian Orthodox Church, and a agreement, not just a political measure, a step in government, but signing this agreement actually, and without any remote consensus on such a divisive measure, not even any effort to build any consensus. And what's even worse and so perplexing is why he would not have focused instead on what he said he wanted, political stability and the unifying priority of European Union membership. That's what is so baffling about the prior Abazovic mandate. He could have been really the highly revered leader of a country that has a wonderful and true European Union perspective, a privilege that the other countries in the region can only imagine. Look at North Macedonia, which and the pressures it is under just simply to open negotiations. And Montenegro is the one that is closest to European Union membership. And why Prime Minister Abazovic wouldn't have focused on that strategic goal, that unifying goal, and instead went for a divisive goal. That's something that is still baffling, and I simply do not understand it, and I hope that Prime Minister Abazovic will explain that, explain publicly what actually he was thinking when he departed from what he said were his priorities.
What about the U.S. representatives in the region? My question is more, does this show a lack of understanding maybe about the situation in the region and the relations between the countries on behalf of the U.S. representatives and ambassadors here?
Well, it's a fair question you ask. And again, I don't want to question anyone's motives in doing this. I think U.S. I know Ambassador Hill, who's an old friend of mine, and who I respect very much. I know he recently gave an interview, again, very enthusiastic about Open Balkans. A special envoy, Escobar, big enthusiast of this. This was originally an initiative that was approved under the Trump administration. I can't speak to their motives. I can't tell you, other than to say that they have good motives for the region. They want to see the region progress, but unfortunately I disagree with them and believe that this vehicle, Open Balkans, is the wrong vehicle. This is not the way to build economic cooperation. And I give an example even for Montenegro that's well known and reported about recently in RFE, Radio Free Europe, which it shows that for Montenegro, in some ways, Open Balkans would be a step backwards. that Montenegro has approved economic regulations required by the European Commission. For example, an examination of agricultural and exports of livestock, animals, and the sanitary guidelines, and has approved and accepted the European Commission standards on this. And Open Balkans doesn't have those standards. Serbia and Albania have agreed that they will do no inspections of animals or foodstuffs in their trade, and that's a step backwards for Montenegro away from European Union, European Commission standards there. So even from that technical standpoint, it's not all good. And I just think that these concerns are just simply not fully appreciated. That people that the political nature of this is not appreciated. And I think the fact that the three countries where you see skepticism here, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Kosovo, it's not a coincidence that those are the three that are most concerned and skeptical. Why? Because they're the ones that are directly threatened by Serbian nationalism. North Macedonia is not threatened by Serbian nationalism. It's threatened by Bulgarian nationalism. Albania is not threatened by Serbian nationalism. It has no Serbs living in the country. So Kosovo has Serbs. Montenegro has Serbs. Bosnia-Herzegovina has Serbs. And in each of those countries, that political polity, the Serb polity, is very much activated, influenced, in some cases, as in Kosovo, directly controlled, Srpska Lista directly controlled from Belgrade, and that's a problem. And I just think that facet of it is not fully appreciated by U.S. officials who otherwise have very good intentions for the entire region. Please.
Well, speaking of the situation in the region, President Vučić recently signed an agreement with Prime Minister Kurti of Kosovo in which they recognized each other's personal documents when crossing the border between the two countries. Some have said that this is, let's say, an informal recognition of the independence of Kosovo, or it is a good step towards the recognition of Kosovo on behalf of Serbia. Do you agree with these assessments?
Not at all. And I think it's actually counterproductive and a mistake, even potentially a bit dangerous, to characterize it in that way. Because characterizing these steps as implicit recognition, which they are not, gives Serbia the excuse not to do them. And this recent, quote, crisis over the documents and over license plates, and the license plate aspect is still not resolved. This is a contrived crisis. This is an unnecessary crisis. And the reason it's unnecessary and contrived by Belgrade, by Alexander Vučić, the proof that it's contrived is it is not implicit recognition. Using RKS license plates, look, Greece accepts the RKS license plates and Kosovo documents. And Greece doesn't recognize Kosovo. And no one says, oh, Greece, well, you allow the RKS license plate and you allow the Kosovo travel documents. So you are recognizing Kosovo. Nobody says that. Pristina does not say that. Prime Minister Kurti, President Osmani, they do not say that. No one makes that claim because they know it's not true. They would like Greece to recognize, but simply accepting these documents and license plates doesn't mean that, and it's the same for Serbia. And it's not good to characterize this as implicit recognition because it's not. And let's remember, there are other steps that Serbia has already taken. Kosovo, for example, collects customs revenue. What kind of if you're a province of a country, how can you collect customs revenue? That's a feature that's much more connected with international status than is the license plates and personal documents. And let's remember those personal documents and this is somehow some big burden on Kosovo Serbs. About approximately 90% of Kosovo Serbs already have the personal identification documents introduced by the Republic of Kosovo, and that's in the north and south. The numbers are only slightly different in between Serbs in the north and Serbs in the south, and really that's where the focus should be, is about the future and the condition and the respect for the Kosovo Serb community. That's where the focus should be, and Alexander Vučić is not putting their interests first. He's putting his own political interests first and making fake crises that do not help the condition and relations between Kosovo Serbs and Kosovar Albanians. Please.
I have another question for you regarding Montenegro, and it's about the announcement by the American government. The U.S. President Joseph Biden yesterday announced that the American government has decided to grant military aid worth $2.2 billion to countries such as Ukraine, which is under attack from Russia, as well as other countries that are potential targets of Russian aggressive politics. This list includes Montenegro. What is the significance of this decision? What is the message?
I'll tell you, it's a very positive message, and it links back to your first question about potential inclusion of DF in a new Montenegrin government, which again would be a very serious mistake. Why would Montenegro want to ignore and offend and provoke the United States when the United States, just at the moment, the United States is showing its loyalty and support for Montenegro in the defense sphere, precisely in a sphere where a Democratic Front is aligned with Russia, with our adversary, the adversary of not just the United States, the adversary of the European Union, the absolute adversary and enemy of Ukraine, which did nothing whatsoever, I repeat, nothing whatsoever to deserve this Russian invasion, which has been condemned by over 140 countries in the UN General Assembly, and which has only exposed, and this is what all citizens of Montenegro, including those who appear to have some affinity for Russia and somehow in some way that I can't understand, support Russia. Look just at the incompetence. How can anyone in Montenegro, I don't care how pro-Serbian and pro-Russian you are, how can you respect, admire, or support a government, criminal government in Russia that is so incompetent that it's sending unequipped, untrained soldiers to be killed in battle, not caring about their own Russian youth. And here we see Ukraine is actually mounting a counter-offensive against Russian forces that are far larger, have far much more firepower and ammunition than does Ukraine. How can you support such an incompetent government? This is who you admire. You can see the complete ineptitude of President Putin. So if nothing else, if you don't care about his corruption, if you don't care about Putin's brutality, shelling directly of civilian targets, destroying a town like Mariupol, the way Serbs destroyed Vukovar in 1991, even if you don't care about that, why would you admire a leader who is so incompetent and can't even manage an invasion against a far smaller country? Please.
Thank you so much, Professor Joseph, for taking the time to speak with us.
You're welcome.